Loving is what I got. I said, remember that. Loving is what I got. I said, remember that. I don't cry when my dog runs away. I don't get angry at the bills I have to pay. Hit the bottle, then go right to the rock. Let the loving come back to me.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys, and welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble, and welcome back, guys. I hope you enjoyed your Wednesday. But we have now moved on to Thirsty Thursday in the house. We will do a call-in tonight. I wasn't planning on doing one, but given the recent news that was announced today, I decided we should probably do a call-in tonight. So that will happen. So many things that are happening, guys. So we definitely have to get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in just because I had 4 stories originally, but there was news that broke today. So I actually have 5 stories now. So one of these is going to be a part 2 to one of the stories that I've already planned to discuss tonight. So we have a lot to discuss. So I'm going to go ahead and try to jump right in. So I want to go ahead and give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. All of you guys, the patrons in the house. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. Keeping the lights on around me. Keeping the lights on around me. Keeping the lights on around me. Where that song? Well, actually, no song. The song is Living My Life Like It's Golden. Living my life like it's golden. Living my life like it's golden. Just change the words. That's all. Just change the words. Anywho, so much to discuss tonight. I'm going to go ahead and get right into that thumbnail so we don't waste any time. Again, we are going to do call in tonight, given the recent news that was announced today. So tonight, we are discussing Cornel West back students. And we also have another story about Cornel West as well in reference to his campaign. So we're going to discuss that as well tonight. That was breaking news today. We're also going to discuss Briahna Joy Gray exposes Vivek Ramaswamy. Yikes. And that is related to the poll question. So if you hadn't had a chance to do so, go ahead and answer that poll in reference to Vivek Ramaswamy's position on foreign policy, in particular, Israel and Palestine. So I thought that discussion was pretty revealing. So we're going to get into that. We're also going to discuss Barack Obama's statements. Yes, Barack Obama has issued a statement in reference to Israel and Palestine. Now, I'm actually surprised by some of the things he said in that statement, but I think I know why those things are said. We're going to discuss that as well Also connected to that story, you are going to hear part of an interview from the Queen of Jordan. And I'm playing part of that interview for a reason, because this is a part of a bigger picture. We're also going to discuss, last but not least, if you have not heard, there is now officially a new Speaker of the House for the Republican Party, and that is Mike Johnson, who some of you may never have heard of until now. Just keeping it real. You can see there's Jim Jordan behind him there with an interesting look on his face, where Jim Jordan is just kind of like, that was supposed to be my spot, bruh. That was supposed to be my spot. But Mike Johnson, nevertheless, has actually ran away with that position. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk a little bit about who Mike Johnson is, some of the things that he said maybe in the past that I think you should be aware of, also versus some of the things that he's saying now. So we're going to get into all of it. Let me go to these two comments here really quick. Thank you for the super chat, Zachary. Thoughts on Peter Dow stepping down from West? We're going to discuss that tonight. Hold on, Zach. We're coming. Hold on. I'm coming. And thank you for the super chat, Roger. Yes, Sab, call in. I must talk about good news in New York State. I think I'm going to cover that tomorrow as well, but sure thing. You guys know how call in is. We kind of just talk about a lot of different things on there, to be honest. Anywho, we're going to go ahead and get into this first story here with Mike Johnson. So let's go through a little bit of a timeline here for those who may have forgotten. Matt Gaetz, along with a couple of others from the Freedom Caucus, decided to oust Kevin McCarthy as Speaker. So again, I like to point back to force the vote and think about some of the things that the squad members could have done in reference to that vote for Nancy Pelosi. So they did go along with that vote, the Freedom Caucus, eventually, after I think 15 rounds of voting for Kevin McCarthy. So he did get in, but not without some concessions. And even after that, along the way, Matt Gaetz decided that, you know what, this isn't going to cut it, bud. So they put together a vote to oust Kevin McCarthy. So then Kevin McCarthy was removed from the House as Speaker. Then there was this recommendation of Jim Jordan. So Jim Jordan, I don't know if we would necessarily put him as part of the Freedom Caucus, but that is someone that Matt Gaetz, I guess, likes under in reference to certain policies, But Jim Jordan, I believe there were 2 rounds to vote for him as Speaker, and he did not win. So in comes Mike Johnson, representative from Louisiana. A lot of people, I think, have never heard of him until now. So it's a very telling moment. So Mike Johnson officially has been voted in as Speaker of the House. And I want to go ahead and jump into that part here from Sky News.
Been a busy 5 o'clock hour this morning, folks, and yet we've got more breaking news because, and also out of the United States, Republican Mike Johnson has been elected Speaker of the US House of Representatives. The Louisiana representative garnered 220 votes, ending 3 weeks of the position's vacancy after the ousting of the former Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Johnson was backed for the position by the former President Donald Trump after serving as the Vice Chair of the House Republican Conference since 2021. And let's go live to Mike Johnson, who's addressing the House now.
Use the gifts that God has given us to serve the extraordinary people of this great country, and they deserve it. And to ensure that our republic remains standing as the great beacon of light and hope and freedom in a world that desperately needs it. It was in 1962 that our national motto, "In God We Trust," was adorned above this rostrum. And if you look at the little guide that they give tourists and constituents who come and visit the House, if you turn in there to about page 14 in the middle of that guide, it tells you the history of this. And it says very simply, these words were placed here above us. This motto was placed here as a rebuke of the Cold War era philosophy of the Soviet Union. That philosophy was Marxism and communism, which begins with the premise that there is no God. This is a critical.
Let's pause here for just a second. So one of the things I'm going to point out in reference to Mike Johnson, obviously he is against the Marxism theory. some of this because of religious reasons, etc. So I just want to paint a picture for you of who he is. He is a Trump Republican, right? So this proves that the theory that there is no way a Speaker of the House from the Republican Party was going to be someone from that MAGA wing, what this vote showed today is that that was incorrect. A lot of people may not realize this, but Mike Johnson is a Trump Republican. He was a supporter of Donald Trump. I believe he still supports Donald Trump. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, I just look back at Force the Vote and I think about the squad. And I remember people back then even saying there's no way any of these squad members or anyone who's for some of these progressive policies is actually going to take any type of leadership position, even like a Speaker of the House, right? That the Democratic Party only wants someone that is a part of the status quo and someone that is corporate, like a Nancy Pelosi. Well, I would have said the same thing about the Republican Party, hence why they wanted to put forth Kevin McCarthy, at least the majority at that point in time. But now we see that's not necessarily true, because now they have Mike Johnson in a Speaker of the House position. So what I am saying is this. This goes to show you that just because you are a few or part of the few, there are always going to be naysayers. That doesn't mean that you cannot use the few numbers that you have to get some type of leverage. So I do have to applaud Matt Gaetz and the other members of the Freedom Caucus that actually forced the vote to get what they want. Something the squad could have done. They basically took the squad strategy from them and said, well, if they're not going to do it, we're going to do it on our side. And so if I was AOC or Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, etc., I would actually be sitting back thinking to myself like, damn, look at what we could have gotten. Look at what could have happened. And what that tells me is that it seems like for whatever reason, that Freedom Caucus wing of the Republican Party seems to be more willing to push and to fight against the majority of the Republican Party in Congress, in the House, whereas the squad was not willing to do that in reference to the Democratic Party.
Critical distinction that is also articulated in our nation's birth certificate. We know the language well, the famous second paragraph that we used to have children memorize in school, and they don't do that so often anymore, but they should. G.K. Chesterton was the famous British philosopher and statesman, and he said one time, America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed. And he said it's listed with almost theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. What is our creed? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, not born equal, created equal.
And when that was written, what Mike Johnson leaves out is that they were referring to men only, and particularly white men, and particularly white men that own property.
And they are endowed by the same inalienable rights, with the same inalienable rights: life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That is the creed that has animated our nation since its founding, that has made us the great nation that we are. And we're in a time of extraordinary crisis right now. And the world needs us to be strong. They need us to remember our creed and our admonition. Turmoil and violence have rocked the Middle East and Eastern Europe. We all know it. And tensions continue to build in the Indo-Pacific. The country demands strong leadership of this body, and we must not waver. Our nation's greatest ally in the Middle East is under attack. The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done.
Okay, well,
so you know where he stands on that issue, right? In reference to the issue with Israel. So just keep that in mind. Now, one of the things I wondered is, well, how does Matt Gaetz feel about this? Well, he actually was interviewed after this vote went through, and it appears that Matt Gaetz is pretty excited about this, that Mike Johnson is now the speaker. I ain't really hear any complaints from him, but take a look for yourself. Matt is happy Kevin is gone.
You going to get Mike Johnson here, it looks like here. Take me through your thinking at this moment. This obviously, is this vindication for you?
Mike Johnson is a godly man. He is a thoughtful man. He understands the complexities of policy decisions. I serve with Mike Johnson not on just one committee, but on two committees, Judiciary and House Armed Services. So he understands foreign policy and military policy. And he's been my seatmate in the Judiciary Committee for 7 years, where I've seen how his tactical proficiency can really help us uproot some of the most weaponized and really unfortunate features of the Biden government.
I mean, there's going to be key issues that he's going to have to confront that McCarthy had to confront of funding the government. Would you be okay if he has to pass a short-term spending bill in mid-November?
Well, Mike Johnson just put out a plan to get rid of the French work week here in Washington and to go to Bayou work hours, where we're here even on weekends, even late at night, passing our appropriations bills. Mike Johnson just moments ago put out his plan on government funding, and you didn't even see the word continuing resolution in that plan. We're going to fund this government. We're going to fund Israel. We're going to fund our troops and our border patrol, but we're not going to do it by mashing all of those issues together in one up or down vote. We're going to address them in single subject legislation.
But
Let me pause here for a second. So again, Matt Gaetz, another example of one of those people that were against the funding for Ukraine, but support the funding for Israel. And again, like I said before, that is because a lot of the politicians are in bed with certain PACs like AIPAC that support their campaigns. Now, this piece here that he brought up about the single subject bill, this was something that was proposed by Matt Gaetz that I actually thought was a good idea. Now, usually agree when it comes to legislation coming from the Republican Party, but that actually made sense. Let me explain to you what that means. Oftentimes, when there are bills that are submitted, these are multiple subject bills. I think one point in time, I think it was last year, I read a bill on the show to show you what a bill looks like and how to read a bill and what you should look for. So when I was in the debate team in high school, we had to do that. We had to read bills. We had to write bills. If you were part of the Congress debate and Lincoln Douglas debate, these are things that we had to do. We learned how to do in high school, right? So anywho, when you have a bill, there are multiple subjects in the bill. So I'll give an example with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders voted for Joe Biden's crime bills, but Bernie says the reason why he did is because the Violence Against Women Act was a part of that bill. This is intentional, by the way. It's intentional that there are multiple subjects attached in one bill. It is a way for one party or another to get what they want passed while you get what you want, even though you may be against what they're pushing for in that bill in reference to one of the items. So it's not uncommon to see other things that are attached to a bill that you may not agree with, but there may be one thing in there that you are pushing for. So you may go ahead and vote for it anyway. The idea of a single subject bill is a great idea because now you can just focus on that one subject at hand. Also, this cuts back time that politicians have to sit there and read, which I don't think they're reading all these bills. I've heard stories about them receiving 4,000 pages for like one bill. Nobody has time to sit there and read 4,000 pages within like 48 hours with multiple bills, right? So essentially, they're not even reading all these things. A lot of times, I think what they're doing is they're just looking at the summary section of that bill and they're voting based on that. If you have a single subject bill, obviously, this will shorten the length of pages that politicians have to read. But more importantly, you are voting on that subject and that subject alone. It will also show you where politicians stand on certain issues. So I did agree with that position in reference to having single subject bills.
If he's going to have to move on a short-term spending bill, if he does, will that be enough to oust him the way you ousted McCarthy?
Well, these aren't short-term spending bills.
Yeah, but he's going to have to. He's not going to by November 17th. If he's forced to move on a short-term spending bill to keep the government open, would you push to oust him?
No, and I don't expect that that's where we're going. And he's put out a plan that's in direct contravention to that. What we're looking at with Mike Johnson is a strategy to put pressure on the Senate to take up our bills. For example, we have over $3 billion in Iron Dome money in our state and foreign ops appropriations bill that we've passed, that the Senate could take up, could amend, could conference with us at any time. And that's a better way to do this than having continuing resolutions govern our country.
So you don't think he's going to do a continuing resolution at all?
He doesn't think he's going to do a continuing resolution based on the substance of the plan he put out. I wouldn't fault Speaker Johnson if we have to have some sort of bridge bridge to those single subject bills, but that was never in the cards with Speaker McCarthy.
But that's what McCarthy exactly did.
No.
He had a bridge to try to do a big, longer bill.
There's a fundamental difference. Kevin McCarthy took 6 weeks off in August, which was the tell that he was never serious about single subject bills. When you're behind schedule, you don't take a 6-week vacation unless your goal is to ultimately truncate the process and get to a continuing resolution. Mike Johnson's goal is to get to single subject spending bills. Kevin McCarthy never had that goal. He might
Pause for a second. I just want to highlight the 6-week vacation for Kevin McCarthy. Again, this just goes to show you the divide between us and them. You know, our congressmen and women, I think, if I remember correctly, I think they get unlimited sick time, but I know most of you work jobs where you only get maybe 2 weeks vacation a year that's paid, or you get no paid vacation. When I was waiting tables, I didn't get paid vacation. If I took time off, that was just unpaid, right? And there are a lot of people that work in the food and service industry that are in that position. But here we have some of our congressmen being able to take 6 weeks off for vacation. I've never had a job where I received that much vacation time in 1 year. Never. So this shows you the difference between them and us.
have said so, but like many things with Kevin McCarthy, it lacked truthfulness and sincerity.
But what if he's forced to agree to spending levels higher than, say the Fiscal Responsibility Act spending levels? Would you accept that under Speaker Johnson?
Oh, look, I understand in divided government, we have to negotiate these things with Biden and with the Senate. I've always said that. The question is what platform to use for that negotiation. I don't think we should be governing by omnibus or continuing resolution. Some of my colleagues just wanted to negotiate the features of that. So I'm sure I won't get a spending level as low as I would probably like it in divided government, but I think we can have more efficacy out of our spending if we have programmatic analysis and review, and you only get that with an amendatory process on single subject bills, not one big up or down vote on funding the government.
It just sounds like you're giving him a lot more leeway that you didn't give McCarthy.
I trust Mike Johnson, and I know Mike Johnson wants to achieve the goals I wanted to achieve. I didn't trust Kevin McCarthy because he wanted to achieve the goals that K Street wanted to achieve. There's a lot of hand-wringing and bedwetting among the lobbyists and the PAC bundlers because they do not have a Speaker of the House anymore that they own and control and can manipulate. Mike Johnson answers to God and the Constitution, and it's not a question of how much leeway to give him. It's accepting the realities of divided government, but we have to change the rules of the game. That's what Mike Johnson's going to do. He's going to really prioritize our single subject bills over whatever ornament one can hang on a continuing resolution. I think that's
okay. And we can go ahead and stop it there, because then it goes off into something else. But so he apparently has more faith in Mike Johnson than he did in Kevin McCarthy. So the reporter there was like, it seems like you're giving Mike Johnson a little bit more leeway than you were willing to give to Kevin McCarthy. But then that trust factor comes in, right? So he didn't trust Kevin McCarthy, I guess, from day one. But then obviously after Kevin McCarthy became speaker, he didn't trust him even more. Now, something else I want to discuss about Mike Johnson, and we're going to show two things. The first thing is this. I saw this video floating around on Twitter of Mike Johnson talking about systemic issues in this country. And I honestly had to watch this video a couple of times because I was like, did he really just say that? Did he say what I thought he said? Now we're going to show you two sides of Mike Johnson. So first, you're going to see something good that Mike Johnson has said and Mike Johnson believes in. So let me show you the good thing first, okay? And this might surprise you because Mike Johnson is conservative, and you don't usually hear this language coming from conservatives. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about the hypocrisy based on political parties. And then I'm going to show you something whack and crazy that Mike Johnson said. So don't get all happy about Mike after you see this video. But let's go into this one first. This is Mike Johnson talking about, well, one, his own personal experience with his children, but systemic issues in this country. Listen to this.
And I've thought often through all these ordeals over the last couple of weeks about the difference in the experiences between my two 14-year-old sons, Michael being a Black American and Jack being white, Caucasian. They have different challenges. My son Jack has an easier path. He just does. The interesting thing about both of these kids, Michael and Jack, is they're both handsome, articulate, really talented kids, gifted by God to do lots of things. But the reality is, and no one can tell me otherwise, My son Michael had a harder time than my son Jack is going to have simply because of the color of his skin. And that's a reality. It's an uncomfortable, painful one to acknowledge, but people have to recognize that's a fact.
What should we do about that?
I think that we really do need systematic change. I think we need transformative solutions. I think we're at a moment where we can begin to do more to form that more perfect union, as it says in the first line of the Constitution. And I've thought often through all these ordeals over the last couple of weeks about the difference in the experiences between my two 14-year-old sons, Michael being a Black American and Jack being white, Caucasian.
Okay, so I did not know this. Again, I was not even familiar with Dude until he won the Speaker of the House. Let's just keep it real. So apparently Mike Johnson has two sons. One of them is white and one of them is Black. And he's talking about the experiences that both of his sons have based on what he has seen. Now, remember, again, Mike Johnson is conservative, but listen to this.
They have different challenges. My son Jack has an easier path. He just does. The interesting thing about both of these kids, Michael and Jack, is they're both handsome, articulate, really talented kids, gifted by God to do lots of things. But I
got to pause there for just a second. The thing about the handsome, it's always funny when people describe like their kids. Oh, my son I have a handsome son. I have a beautiful daughter. Like, what if your kid's just ugly? Like, do you say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Don't come for me. Don't come for me. But I think about it. What if your kid's just ugly? Like, do you say, I have an ugly son, but they're very talented and gifted and everything? Everybody believes that their kid, their son is handsome and their daughter is beautiful. But what if you have an ugly kid and you just feel that your kid is ugly? Do you say, my son is ugly, but he's talented? And let me quit. Let's continue.
reality is, and no one can tell me otherwise. My son Michael had a harder time than my son Jack is going to have simply because of the color of his skin. And that's a reality. It's an uncomfortable, painful one to acknowledge, but people have to recognize that's a fact.
What should we do?
So here is Mike Johnson admitting that obviously that Black people and white people have different struggles in this country, and that his Black son faces greater challenges than his white son. And not only that, but he went on to say, no one can tell me otherwise. Now, let me let this play, because I'm going to talk about the hypocrisy in just a second.
Know about that.
I think that we really do need systematic change. I think we need transformative solutions. I think we're at a moment where we can begin to do more to form that more perfect union, as it says in the first line of the Constitution.
Okay, so Mike Johnson says we need systemic change in reference to racial struggles in this country. I have no problem with that statement. I'm not trying to punch down on Mike at all with that statement. But here's the hypocrisy. Why is it that all these years that leftists have been making those comments, we were called, that's woke. That's IPOL. Don't talk about identity politics. Don't bring that up in here. Don't do it. But now, like when a conservative person does it, now people on the right agree with it. Agree. See, this is the problem with partisan politics. Because naturally, it's human nature to cheer for and root for your team, even when your team may be in the wrong. Look at this as like sports teams, for example. How many of you played sports in the chat? Raise your hand. I played sports, right? When I played sports, nobody could tell me my team was wrong. We were never in the wrong. Okay. So when I played basketball in middle school. If someone on my team got a foul, oh no, you couldn't tell me. No, none of my teammates. No, we didn't do nothing wrong. That's a bad call, ref. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You watch sports, but there was nothing you could do to tell me that my team was wrong, right? So look at these political parties like teams. The Republican Party is one team. Democratic Party is another team. Obviously, if you're a part of one of these parties, you're going to, for the most part, you're going to back your team. You're going to support your team. So the problem that I have is that when you had people who were Democrats and people outside of the Democratic Party, people part of the Green Party, making those same statements that Mike Johnson just said, there was pushback. We're told it's identity politics. We're told that it's woke language. We're told that from people on the right. But now that someone on the right is saying those same things, now all of a sudden, it's not identity politics. It's not woke language. So this is just, again, another problem with political parties. This is why I say abolish political parties, and you might see how people really feel, because then they're not rooting for a team. Now, that was a good statement from Mike. Now we're going to get to a whack-ass statement from Mike. Mike is cray. Let me show you this one, okay? You ready? New Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, once wrote in support for the criminalization of gay sex. No, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Again, I don't know why people worried about what's happening in other people's bedrooms, but here we go. Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has a history of harsh anti-gay language from his time as an attorney for a socially conservative legal group in the mid-2000s. In editorials that ran in his local Shreveport, Louisiana paper, The Times, Johnson called homosexuality an inherently unnatural and dangerous lifestyle that would lead to legalized pedophilia and possibly even destroy the entire democratic system. And it's just really interesting to me because I don't know why some people think that if someone is a part of the LGBTQ community, that they're living a dangerous lifestyle. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. And in another editorial he wrote, your race, creed, and sex are what you are, while homosexuality and cross-dressing are things you do. This is a free country, but we don't give special protections for every person's bizarre choices. So this is another thing that I want to point to. Again, this belief that some people have that it's a choice. It's not a choice. At the time, Johnson was an attorney and spokesman for Alliance Defense Fund, known today as Alliance Defending Freedom, where he also authored his opposition to the Supreme Court ruling in Lawrence versus Texas, which overturned state laws that criminalize homosexual activity between consenting adults. So to this, I have to ask, why do you care what people do in their bedroom? Why do you care? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't. What are you looking for, Mike? What's happening? Went on to say, states have many legitimate grounds to prescribe same-sex deviant sexual intercourse. Johnson wrote in a July 2003 op-ed calling it a public health concern. By closing these bedroom doors, they have opened a Pandora's box. Oh, man. Now Johnson is the Speaker of the House at a time when a majority of Americans are strongly supportive of gay rights. In the House Republican conference voting for the Speaker nominee, Tom Emmer, who initially beat out Johnson, came under fire from conservatives for voting to codify same-sex marriage in 2022. So Tom Emmer was one of the Republicans that voted in support of codifying it. Johnson, according to Punchbowl News, reportedly made an issue of Emmer's vote. John voted against the bill. In 2022, Johnson also introduced a bill that some described as a national version of what critics have called Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. In the mid-2000s, Johnson's anti-gay rhetoric was harsh. In September 2004, Johnson wrote in support of a Louisiana amendment banning same-sex marriage, saying it could lead to people marrying their pets. See, this is the kind of stuff some people think. They think that if someone's a part of the LGBTQ community, they're just out there living like this wild ass lifestyle. This is what some people really believe. So he thought people would marry their pets. These are the kind of things that we have to point out. So again, he believes that's unnatural, yada, yada. He is conservative, But this whole piece here, where he actually wanted to criminalize gay sex, is very concerning and just weird. Again, like I said, why are you worried about what people are doing in the bedroom? Why? Go get some, Mike. Go get some. That's all I gotta say. Go get some. I really think a lot of times it's people who are sexually repressed. I really do. So they're focused on what other people are doing, you know? But it is official. Mike Johnson is now officially the Speaker of House. So we should see how it goes. Gonna go to some of the comments here. Emily says MAGA's forced the vote worked. I know. It just, this is just, you know, it really, it's bothersome, I think, because I just think about what we could have had, you know, if the squad would have gone through with it. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Wow, they elected Stephen Colbert as speaker. He does kind of look like Stephen Colbert. A Hill says you can't get your pick if you follow the majority. There you go. Hedges Gospel. Oh my God, Sabby, that Sublime t-shirt. Where are more like you out there? Okay, so you want to know the story about this t-shirt? There's a quick story about this t-shirt. Ready for it? Okay. I like band t-shirts. I think I have a couple more. I don't know. I gotta go through my clothes. But I like band t-shirts, but I don't like paying a lot of money for band t-shirts. And if you go to places like Spencer's, which does have those t-shirts, Newbury Comics, they have them too. They're expensive. But anyway, I found this at Forever 21. But I loved Sublime. Like Sublime is one of my favorite bands. But the thing is that today is laundry day. I have to do laundry, and I have Shama Swan's coming on tomorrow night, so I really make sure I get like at least a load done. But it's laundry day. That's why I got on a t-shirt. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Can't stop laughing. Sounds like saying my Johnson. Thank you for this, Roger. Sab, we talked about this applying to CBIs as well. Yes, we did. Thank you for the super chat, Barack Obama. Them. Vivek is a snake. And thank you for this one as well. Do these politicians work for Israel or the USA? Thank you for the super chat, 007 Angelo. Look up Rodney Dangerfield, ugly kid joke, funny AF. Oh, yeah. Okay, I have to look that up. Rodney Dangerfield is hilarious. Terry says, Sabby, where's your Aerosmith t-shirt? I've never had an Aerosmith t-shirt. I had an AC/DC t-shirt. I had a Run DMC t-shirt. My sister took the Run DMC t-shirt. She might have taken the AC/DC You know what? I need to contact. I bet you that's where some of my shirts went. I bet you. Thank you for the super chat, Nambians. My Shriners Hall in Dorchester, Massachusetts is trying to organize a peace rally and would love your support. Please hit me up. Nambians, please send me an email. Email me, please. My email address is in the description of all my videos. Take the comment on Rockfin, and then we'll go to the next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Oh, look, it's the COVID mask tan line man again. Anyway, Sab, I watched Trump brag about what he was going to do for the black man. I couldn't hear enough firsthand about what Trump was going to do for the black man. You just watch. This is nothing new. They just want someone on their team to give them a win. Sab, if there is any electorate that is imperative to register Indy, it's black, especially freedmen. Register independent, guys. Register independent. I never had an Insane Clown Posse t-shirt because I am terrified of clowns. There was a movie, you know, back in the day called It, and Stephen King, you are the reason why I'm afraid of clowns. So I was never one of those kids that had a clown at a birthday party and none of that. None of it. I blame you, Stephen. I blame you. All right, I'm a little silly tonight. Let's get to the next story here about Barack Obama. So believe it or not, Barack Obama is back in the news again because he has officially released a statement in reference to Israel and Palestine. I don't know why he feels like he keeps needing to do like to release these statements just because he's not president anymore. He's not a politician. But apparently, for some reason, Barack Obama feels that people care what he thinks, right? So let's go ahead and show this clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this. And then we're going to get into that actual statement from Barack Obama.
Barack Obama weighing in on the ongoing Israel-Hamas war and the Mideast crisis. He states in a new essay that the Israeli government's decision to cut off food and water to a captive civilian population threatens to worsen the crisis and harden Palestinian attitudes for generations. He talks about that eroding global support for Israel and his concerns that it could undermine the long-term efforts, which include those in his administration, to achieve peace and stability. Obama also writes in this same essay that Israel has a right to defend its citizens against wanton violence, and he notes that he supports President Biden's call for the United States to support our longtime ally in going after Hamas, dismantling its military capabilities, and facilitating the safe return of those hostages. We report on some of that tonight. Also, Obama mentioning it's time to make sure all actively oppose anti-Semitism and reject efforts that he calls, quote, minimizing the terrible tragedy that the Israeli people have just endured.
This part right here, because we'll get into the actual statement where he says actively opposing anti-Semitism, rejecting efforts to minimize the terrible tragedy that the Israeli people have just endured, rejecting efforts to minimize. This is essentially Barack Obama calling for forms of censorship, you know, because I saw a video, it's floating around on Twitter. I'm not going to play it on here because I don't think YouTube will like that. But there are actually Israeli content creators on Instagram and on TikTok, and they've been making videos painting their faces like Palestinian people. They've been mocking Palestinian people in the utmost, like the worst way, the worst way. They've even made fun of the children. It's bad. That's why I said I'm not going to play it on here. But I would like to see people like Barack Obama call that out as well. Now, oh, I didn't finish that. Sorry. Let me let this finish and I'll get to the statement.
Just endured. That is Barack Obama weighing in, as many people around the world have. He did it in his characteristic style. You can search Obama Medium, where that full essay is, as he discusses the foreign policy issues, support for the Biden administration's approach, and as you heard there, his attempt to wrestle with many of the complex issues in this war.
Okay. Let's get to the statement from Obama. Because what was interesting about this is that, number one, I didn't know Obama wrote for Mediums, random. But number two, he tries to both side this a bit. Now, some of the things that he said you might be surprised by, but make no mistake, he's still on the side of Israel. Like, he's not stupid. He knows like what he needs to do in order to maintain the spot that he has. So let's get into this. Thoughts on Israel and Gaza from Barack Obama. Yep, he's on Medium, folks. It's been 17 days since Hamas launched its horrific attack against Israel, killing over 1,400 Israeli citizens, including defenseless women, children, and the elderly. In the aftermath of such unspeakable brutality, the U.S. government and the American people have shared in the grief of families, prayed for the return of loved ones, and rightly declared solidarity with the Israeli people. So let me highlight this here. No. Because if you pay attention to the protests, Barack Obama, which I'm pretty sure he has, the majority of the people, the world, actually stands with the Palestinian people and their plight. He goes on to say, as I stated in an earlier post, Israel has a right to defend its citizens against such wanton violence. And I fully support President Biden's call for the U.S. to support our longtime ally in going after Hamas, dismantling its military capabilities, and facilitating the safe return of hundreds of hostages to their families. So what they're essentially saying here, when they continue to repeat this phrase, that it has a right to defend itself, you notice you never hear them say that Gaza has a right to defend itself, that the West Bank has a right to defend itself, that the Palestinian people have a right to defend themselves. You never hear them say that. And when they made the statement that they give unwavering support to the state of Israel, What that means is that it gives Israel a pass to do whatever they want to the Palestinian people and others. We'll get into that in a second. So pay attention to that you never hear them say it the other way around. So essentially what that means is, how are you defending yourself? First of all, let's put it this way. When there was the attack from Hamas and Israel responded, they could say that was Israel defending itself. But Israel has still been attacking. How are you still defending yourself if you're still just, especially if you're going after civilians? People say, well, they're not. They hit the West Bank. Israel bombed the West Bank. Hamas is in Gaza. Israel has been bombing Syria and Lebanon. Hamas isn't there. So how are you defending yourself now? So just keep that in mind. Now, here's where he switches up. He tries to do the other side. But even as we support Israel, we should also be clear that how Israel prosecutes this fight against Hamas matters. In particular, it matters, as President Biden has repeatedly emphasized, that Israel's military strategy abides by international law, including those laws that seek to avoid, to every extent possible, the death or suffering of civilian populations. Upholding these values is important for its own sake, because it is morally just and reflects our belief in the inherent value of every human life. Upholding these values is also vital for building alliances and shaping international opinion, all of which are critical for Israel's long-term security. So here he is trying to both sides it, and I want to be very clear. This piece where he brings up the suffering of civilian populations, what's happening to the Palestinian people, I honestly believe that had it not been for the protests happening all across the world, and these protests are increasing, by the way, I don't even think he would have acknowledged that. This is where outside organizing and pressure on the outside can actually push people to acknowledge what's going on. Now, Barack Obama is not a political official anymore, but it can push people to have to. Before those protests were happening, mainstream media didn't say anything positive about the Palestinian people. They weren't willing to acknowledge the open air prison. They didn't really want to talk about what was happening to those people before October 7th. They didn't want to go into any of that. Now you see them, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, having to have these discussions about why they're in this situation to begin with in the first place. And I don't think that would have happened had it not been for the public pressure pushing back on this idea that the Palestinian people are just nothing, and that they haven't been struggling, and that they haven't had to suffer, and that they haven't been occupied. So this is where outside pressure actually does work. This is an enormously difficult task. War is always tragic, and even the most carefully planned military operations often put civilians at risk. As President Biden noted during his recent visit to Israel, America itself has at times fallen short of our higher values when engaged in war. And after the aftermath of September 11, the U.S. government wasn't interested in heeding the advice of even our allies when it came to the steps we took to protect ourselves against al-Qaeda. Now, after systemic massacre of Israeli citizens, a massacre that evokes some of the darkest memories of persecution against the Jewish people, it's understandable that many Israelis have demanded that their government do whatever it takes to root out Hamas and make sure such attacks never happen again. Moreover, Hamas military operations are deeply embedded within Gaza, and its leadership seems to intentionally hide among civilians, thereby endangering the very people they claim to represent. I would say refusing to give people in Gaza water is endangering the people. I would say like cutting off electricity so that they can't operate in the hospitals is endangering the people. I would say that giving people in Gaza dirty water is endangering the people. So the Palestinian people are essentially living in ghettos. that they're not allowed to leave. Let's continue. Still, the world is watching closely as events in the region unfold, and any Israeli military strategy that ignores the human cost could ultimately backfire. Already, thousands of Palestinians have been killed in the bombing of Gaza, many of them children. So we have to remember, again, the majority of the population in Gaza are kids. So just keep that in mind. Hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes. Let me highlight this. We'll come back to it. The Israeli government's decision to cut off food, water, and electricity to a captive civilian population threatens not only to worsen a growing humanitarian crisis, it could further harden Palestinian attitudes for generations, erode global support for Israel, and play into the hands of Israel's enemies and undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. Let's go to the highlighted text and then I'll come back to what he said there at the end. He said, hundreds of thousands have been forced from their homes. Hundreds of thousands were forced from their homes decades ago. Palestinians that lived in Jerusalem, Palestinians that lived outside of the fence of Gaza and the West Bank, they were forced from their homes decades ago, not just recently after October 7th. Anyone talking about this crisis who is not willing to discuss the history and how we got here, you need to give a side eye. But what is interesting is the fact that Obama even pointed out the humanitarian crisis, which I am surprised that he mentioned that. This piece here towards the end, it could further harden Palestinian attitudes for generations, erode global support for Israel, play into the hands of Israel's enemies, and undermine long-term efforts to achieve peace and stability in the region. This is one of the things that people have pointed out, is that this is not good for Netanyahu. Because other countries, and we're going to get into Jordan in just a second, other countries are watching this, and it can make some of them not want to support Israel financially anymore in the future. Because they're watching what's happening to the Palestinian people. So this is the warning that Barack Obama is giving, that Israel could lose some of its allies. So again, like I said, this is not a good look for Netanyahu. Also, some of the racist statements that Netanyahu has made recently, where he said Israel is the children of the light and the Palestinian people are the children of the dark. That's some racist shit. Let's just keep it real. And this piece right here, it is therefore important that those of us supporting Israel in this time encourage a strategy that can incapacitate Hamas while minimizing further civilian casualties. Minimizing it. Israel's recent shift to allow relief trucks into Gaza, prompted in part by the Biden administration's behind-the-scene diplomacy, is an encouraging step. But we need to continue to lead the international community in accelerating critical aid and supplies to an increasingly desperate Gaza population. So again, to that point, you need to explain why they're desperate, because they're not desperate due to October 7th. They were already desperate and in that position before then. And while the prospects of future peace may seem more distant than ever, we should call on all of the key actors in the region to engage with those Palestinian leaders and organizations that recognize Israel's right to exist, to begin articulating a viable pathway for Palestinians to achieve their legitimate aspirations for self-determination, because that is the best and perhaps the only way to achieve the lasting peace and security most Israeli and Palestinian families yearn for. So this piece right here is why people are saying, did Obama really just say that? This piece right here. To begin articulating a viable pathway for Palestinians to achieve their legitimate aspirations for self-determination. Now, some people read this and they thought, oh, is he calling for a push for the two-state solution? I told you guys before, I don't see how that could work now because there's just too many settlements. But I am very surprised that he said we need to articulate a viable pathway for Palestinians to achieve the legitimate aspirations of self-determination. Now, why do I think he's saying this? Why this is happening? Because for one, you got to remember, Barack Obama has kids that are in college. No, I think his kids are still in college. At least one of them is still in college. How do most college students feel about this issue? Most of the students, they don't like what Israel's doing. Most of the students are standing with the Palestinian people and their struggle and their plight. And then there's the protests that are happening internationally. The masses of people coming out in the streets. In his former home of Chicago, Chicago had one of the largest protests. You can't ignore it. And the majority, especially the younger people, they don't like it, bruh. They don't like it. So he had to respond in a way that tells people that he realizes that the Palestinian people need self-determination. Now, he still tries to both sides it. He's still, obviously he's still going to say, we got to support Israel and all that kind of stuff. He knows that. If he went against it, Barack Obama will fall off the social ladder so damn fast. That would be the end of Barack. You wouldn't hear nothing about him again. But why is this important? Why is this important that we address this issue? Because I want to show you this isn't just about Palestine. Now, the Queen of Jordan, her name is Rania. She actually had an interview recently on CNN. She is speaking out about what's happening to the Palestinian people. And I want you to hear this. Now, this is Christine that's hosting this interview. Listen to this.
Jordan is home to 40% of the total registered Palestinian refugees in the Middle East, according to the UN. That is simply a huge number, especially for a small country. Jordan's Queen Rania is herself of Palestinian descent, and she's joining me now for a world exclusive from Amman, the capital. Queen Rania, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Christian.
Can I ask you first, as an Arab, as a Palestinian, as a human being, a mother, how you're feeling ever since October 7th?
Well, look, Christian, I cannot begin to describe to you the depth of the grief, the pain, and the shock that we are feeling here in Jordan. All of us are united in this grief, regardless of our origin. We are just can't believe the images that we're seeing every single day coming out of Gaza. We're going to bed seeing those images and waking up to them. I don't know how to, as a mom, we've seen Palestinian mothers who've had to write the names of their children on their hands because the chances of them being shelled to death, of their bodies turning into corpses, are so high. I just want to remind the world that Palestinian mothers love their children just as much as any other mother in the world. And for them to have to go through this is just unbelievable. And equally, I think the people all around the Middle East, including in Jordan, we are just shocked and disappointed by the world's reaction to this catastrophe that is unfolding. In the last couple of weeks, we have seen a glaring double standard in the world. When October 7th happened, the world immediately and unequivocally stood by Israel and its right to defend itself and condemned the attacks that happened. But what we're seeing the last couple of weeks, we're seeing silence in the world. Countries have stopped at just expressing concern or acknowledging the casualties, but always with a preface of declaration of support for Israel. And, are we being told that it is wrong to kill a family, an entire family at gunpoint, but it's okay to shell them to death? I mean, there is a glaring double standard here. And it is just shocking to the Arab world. This is the first time in modern history that there is such human suffering, and the world is not even calling for a ceasefire. So the silence is deafening, and to many in our region, it makes the Western world complicit, through their support and through the cover that they give Israel, that it is just its right to defend itself. Many in the Arab world are looking at the Western world as not just tolerating this, but as aiding and abetting it. And this is just horrendous, and it's deeply, deeply disappointing to all of us.
And I want to just chime in about something she said there about how, people in her country are looking at like the Western world. So let's just go with the United States here, right? Because we are funding the state of Israel. Here's the thing. This is part of the reason why some people in other countries have so much disdain for the United States. It doesn't look good. Like when people think about the suffering, what's happening to the people in Palestine, they're going to think about, oh, yeah, the U.S., of course, the U.S. is funding it. If you go to places like Yemen or Syria, you can see it as well. Oh, sure, of course, the U.S. was funding it. And this can actually make people in countries like Jordan and Egypt. And honestly, I'm going to slide in Saudi Arabia too, because Saudi Arabia is already a little on shaky ground. Like Saudi Arabia is kind of like that. Saudi Arabia is the friend that has one foot out the door. So it's like Saudi Arabia was like best friends with the United States, and they used to be besties and hang out every Friday, movie night, all that jazz, go to the bar, get lit, all that kind of stuff. But then one day, Saudi Arabia met another friend, and that friend was China. And China said, hey, want to come over and hang out at my house? We got a free keg. And Saudi Arabia decided to come on over and party with China. And honestly, they were like, you know what? China treat me all right. They treat me all right. And then China introduced Saudi Arabia to some of their other friends that were part of BRICS. And Saudi Arabia went to the club and clubbed with BRICS, and they was just hanging out and having a good time. And Saudi Arabia was like, you know what? The United States was wrong. China and the rest of these peeps are actually pretty cool. Now, the U.S. is sitting at home on a Friday night, and the U.S. is trying to figure out how come Saudi Arabia is not responding to my text messages. I used to text them, and Saudi used to respond on the quick and say, yeah, I'll meet you there. It's been 24 hours, and they haven't responded to my text. What's going on, Saudi Arabia? Why are you not responding to me? So then the U.S. starts to get a little bit stalkerish. It becomes that stalker friend that starts texting you every hour on the hours like, I know you see this message. Damn you, Saudi Arabia. You better answer me. I know you see this. Why haven't you spoken to me in 2 days? Do I need to come by your house? And Saudi Arabia gets freaked out. And Saudi Arabia wants to respond. But at the same time, Saudi Arabia is like, well, it's probably not a good idea for me to respond now because I've been invited to join BRICS. So Saudi Arabia doesn't get the opportunity to tell the U.S. that, but the U.S. finds out about it because the U.S. sees it on the news and is like, ain't that a bitch? That's why Saudi Arabia ain't been talking to me. That's why they missed movie night. That's why they ain't been clubbing with me. They've been hanging out with them BRICS people. But see, the U.S. got to keep it cool because the U.S. still needs oil from Saudi Arabia. So the U.S. has to take a step back and be like, damn, I still need that motherfucker for oil. So the U.S. picks up the phone and leaves a message. Sorry, I reacted the way that I did. I was going through some things. But I just want to keep the peace. I just wanted you to know I missed you. That's all. I hope we still cool. So Saudi Arabia doesn't call the U.S. back, but sends a text message that says, okay. That's where we are right now with Saudi Arabia. Whenever you get that K from somebody after you laid out this whole speech, You on shaky ground. So inserting Saudi Arabia into this as well, you really need to think. Saudi Arabia giving the U.S. a side eye right now because Saudi Arabia is hanging out with the BRICS peeps. And Saudi Arabia also knows that U.S. still needs them for that oil. So just keep that in mind at who is looking at us and in what kind of way.
Queen Rania, I'm going to ask you more about this and go deeper into this, into your feelings about this. But first, I want to ask you, the Israelis are shocked to their core, the grief, what happened to them has never happened in that way since the Holocaust. And they are shaken to their core, as I said, and the grief. I just want to get from you what you felt on October 7th.
Well, of course, I was shocked. And, Jordan has made his position very clear. We condemn the killing of any civilian, whether Palestinian or Israeli. That is Jordan's ethical and moral position. And it's also the position of Islam. Islam condemns the killing of civilians. As my husband mentioned recently, the Pact of Omar, which was issued on the gates of Jerusalem 15 centuries ago, that's 1,000 years before the Geneva Conventions, orders Muslims not to kill a woman, child, or elderly person, and not to destroy a tree or hurt a priest. And so this is what we believe are the rules of engagement at time of war, but they need to apply to everybody. So yes, there was the shock and there is the condemnation, but why isn't there equal condemnation to what is happening now? I just want to emphasize that what happened on this conflict did not begin on October 7th, although it has been being portrayed as that. Most networks are covering the story under the title of Israel at War. But for many Palestinians on the other side of the separation wall, on the other side of the barbed wire, war has never left. This is a 75-year-old story, a story of overwhelming death and displacement to the Palestinian people. It is a story of an occupation under an apartheid regime that occupies land, that demolishes houses, confiscates land, military incursions, night raids. The context of a nuclear-armed regional superpower that occupies, oppresses, and commits daily documented crimes against Palestinians is missing from the narrative.
Queen Rania,
for too long, Palestinians' life.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I want to ask you a specific question because you're using a lot of words which.
Oh no, you're using too many words. It's wrecking my brain. You're saying too much. You're saying too much. It hurts. Stop. But the point I wanted you to hear there that the Queen of Jordan made, we need to stop talking about this in reference to what happened on October 7th as if that is the beginning of this. That's not the beginning of this. And I think a lot of us that have been paying attention to what's happening to the Palestinian people, we've known about that for a long time. But you see how mainstream media is discussing it. Now I want to show you why I wanted you to hear from the Queen of Jordan. Not just the fact that she's Palestinian, but I told you before, this is not just about Palestine. There is a greater plan here that we've discussed earlier on the JB and Sabby show on RBN earlier. They want to expand. I want to show you the map. Expansionism or the greater Israel. So this has already been discussed before. Like this is not like a secret thing or none of that. You can Google it and easily find this. And I want you to look at this map. How can I make it so that the map just, oh, I guess I can't do it that way. Will they let me do it that way? Yeah. There we go. Look at this map. Actually, I made that worse. I'm sorry, guys. Eric had it right the first time. Okay, look at this map. So the dotted line here says UN recognized national borders. So you can see here's Lebanon, Syria, there's Palestine, right? Then we get into Jordan, and there's Egypt. Remember, I told you Egypt is right next to Palestine. The goal is not just to remain in Palestine. The goal is to expand into the southern part of Lebanon into part of Syria, part of Jordan, and Egypt. And if you go down, notice there's even a little tip of Saudi Arabia, and there's other pictures that show a want to go further than that in reference to Saudi Arabia as well. So what I'm saying is this: Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Syria, Lebanon, you guys are targets too. It's not just Palestine. That's why I wanted you to hear from the Queen of Jordan. Like, this is something to pay close attention to. Again, I told you Israel is bombing Lebanon. Israel is bombing Syria. Hamas isn't in those countries. They want to take over. See, look, they want to do this, get Lebanon and Syria too. And into Egypt. So for the people who tell me, well, Egypt, just open your door and let the Palestinians come in. First of all, Egypt said they don't even have the space. But again, would that actually solve it? If the goal is to expand into Egypt too? See, this is why, I think there was another one here I was going to show. Or did I show it? Oh, no, I didn't show that. This part up here. This is why it says the Jewish state was founded on the basis of ancient biblical map. And to this date, the Jewish state still refuses to declare its borders in favor of future expansion. There is nothing like this biblical map to send shivers among Arabs and Muslims, since its borders span the occupied West Bank, including occupied East Jerusalem, occupied Gaza Strip, southern Lebanon, the western parts of Jordan, and the southern Syria, including the occupied Golan Heights. So this is what I've been trying to tell everybody. This is the ultimate goal. And I talked about this before in reference to colonialism. Like, when you colonize a place, it's not like you say, I'm just going to colonize just this northeastern part of North America. No, they spread. The goal is to acquire as much land as possible for your people. And that is the goal. This is why I continue to say, and I've said this before, there were multiple opportunities to reach an agreement way before October 7th. 2002, the Arab Peace Initiative. That was a proposal to give the Palestinians part of the land and give the Israelis part of the land. Israel rejected it. So what they tell you? They don't want no agreement. They want all the land. And we have politicians supporting apartheid. You go to some of the comments. We got to wake up, guys. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. I know, not out here talking about 9/11 H2O crisis. Thank you, Barack Obama. We got money for war, but can't feed the poor. That's right. Tupac quote there. Thank you, Eric, for the super chat. Keep in mind that this is the same monster in Barack Obama that destroyed Libya, even though Muammar Gaddafi had love for President Obama. But remember, they came after Gaddafi because Gaddafi, again, wanted to make Africa independent from the West. He didn't want Africa to have to depend on the West anymore. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Notice also they never mentioned the 5,000 Palestinians Israel had imprisoned without charge before the 7th, aka holding them hostage. Well said. Thank you, Roger. Sabby, are you doing projection? Who stood you up? No one stood me up. That's funny. We can talk about that on call-in, though. Thank you, Julie O. Jocko Willink, Jocko Willink was talking about how Israel says Hamas is in. Sorry, there's something on my computer screen. I don't know what that is, but it's there. Oh, well, you guys can't see it. Jocko Willink was talking about how Israel says Hamas is in the tunnels and underground, so them bombing buildings isn't taking out Hamas. Great point by a very respected veteran and former SEAL. Thank you, Julio. I don't know why I was about to salute you. Like, I don't know. I was about to go, what's up? All right, guys, let's go to our next story here. And this is about Vivek. Now, Briahna Joy Gray and Robbie had the opportunity to interview Vivek Ramaswamy, particularly about his position on foreign policy. I think you're going to hear a lot of word salad come from Vivek, particularly when it comes to what he would do if he were president in reference to this position with Israel and Palestine. So let's go ahead and get into it. I think you're in for a good time. Grab some popcorn. Let's go.
I have a preference between those paths, but they're at least coherent. One is actually embracing the true Israel first and true America first view. That's what I favor. And the founding of Israel was based on the idea that Israel has an absolute right to national self-existence and to defend itself as it appropriately should. And I stand for that view. Israel's Israel first view. I'm an America first leader of the United States that says every decision I make as the US president is made with a moral obligation to the American people.
So let's hold on to that piece right there where he says that he supports the Israel first view. Just hold on to that piece.
So what does that mean in terms of policy? I think we should provide Israel a diplomatic iron dome that stops any other country or the UN or anybody else criticizing or getting in the way of Israel substantively defending its own homeland.
Pause. So this is the scary part. I hope you guys notice what he just said there. That we should supply them with an iron dome, that there is an iron dome. But what was weird is that he said, not just in reference to Israel defending itself, but in reference to anyone criticizing Israel defending itself. So is Vivek for censorship? Is he for censorship now? You heard that right, folks. Pay attention. Pay attention. This interview is very revealing.
Attack by Hamas on Israel, it was inhumane. It was subhuman. It was barbaric. And Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself. And our job can be a diplomatic one to give Israel the air cover that it needs diplomatically to be able to do that. I think that's the cleanest solution for all. I think that we have been wrongfully engaged with military presence in the Middle East for decades that has not served us well. However, I'm not president yet, if we're going down the path of talking about complex forms of aid, financially or militarily or otherwise, then yes, the U.S., and my job as the U.S. president will have to be to then ask demanding questions about what exactly is the plan for a ground invasion of Gaza? Is it a prolonged conflict? Is it one that results in a likely two-front war that further draws the U.S. in? We have to have clear answers to those questions so that we can clearly state this is what we will and what we won't support. Right now, I'm worried we live in the worst of both worlds, though, which is neither of those two reasonable options, but a third reasonable option that vaguely has some ill-defined financial and military commitments when we don't even understand what exactly those objectives are.
Vivek, so long story short, Vivek still supports the Israel first policy. Vivek supports sending funds to Israel. See, this is what I was saying about some of those politicians that were good on Ukraine, but when you change the country to Israel, not so good. So can people stop calling Vivek anti-war now because he's not? He's not. Let's continue.
So do I think Israel has to answer to the United States? No. Israel doesn't need the U.S. permission to do what it needs to advance its own interests. But if there's going to be a serious discussion about U.S. involvement, then yes, it's the job of the U.S. to ask those questions. I think that's a coherent position. It's my view. It's one that probably other Republicans, some of them behind closed doors, would share if they weren't so scared of their own shadows in being labeled anti-Israel if they say this. The irony is that this isn't anti-Israel. This is deeply pro-Israel, aligned with the original founding vision of Israel itself, that it has the right to defend itself. And that's what I stand for. I'm an America First leader, and I endorse Israel pursuing an Israel First agenda as well.
So help me understand.
So just before we get to what Bree says, when he says like he supports Israel supporting an Israel first agenda as well, essentially what he is also saying is he does not support the Palestinian people having that same type of push for their people and their existence. Just understand that, guys.
understand your distinction between yourself and other candidates. It does seem to me that constructively what you're saying is that the U.S. would continue to fund the Iron Dome. It provides around $3.8 billion of military aid to Israel, including for that purpose every year. And so it does sound like you're in line with the Republican and Democratic establishment in continuing funding, military funding for Israel. Is that right?
Yeah, so I was using an expression of the diplomatic Iron Dome.
So what does that mean to you?
It was a turn of phrase. So fair enough. If it was unclear, let me explain it. What I mean by that is there's been a long habit of the UN and other institutions pressuring Israel to take steps that would not allow it to fully defend itself, creating a false equivalence between Israel's national self-defense and the actions of Hamas or the other terrorists who target Israel. So my view is we should diplomatically, as a matter of diplomacy, stand publicly at the UN or otherwise in favor of Israel's ability to come to its own national self-defense.
Okay, I think I understand.
Without any U.S. involvement. So, there's the physical Iron Dome. I use the phrase the diplomatic Iron Dome, providing that level of diplomatic air cover.
Right.
So he's talking in circles because in one point here, he says no U.S. involvement, but then he also said before that he supports the U.S., obviously funding Israel and helping. So I just want people to pay attention to the way that when it comes to this particular topic, he kind of talks in circles. Because I want to be very clear. I want people to understand he is not saying that he doesn't want the U.S. to still support Israel. He still wants the U.S. to support Israel. But what he's also saying at the same time is that Israel should be able to make their own decisions and their own choices. But he's not saying that he wants the U.S. to not support Israel. Just pay attention to that, guys.
That's
so my
our
follow-ups would then be, would you then cut funding? Would you stop funding Israel to the tune of about $3 to $4 billion a year, the way we have been doing historically? And also on the point of what the perhaps limits of Israel's right to defend itself, the question on the international community and before the UN is whether or not Israel's acts are, in fact, in self-defense for two reasons. One is that at this point, there has been a disproportionate response when you look at the number of people killed in the horrific events of October 7th, which is around 1,400 Israelis, versus now verging on 6,000 people of Gaza, innocent women, children, civilians that have been killed in that attack. Is it the case that at some point Israel's actions against the people of Gaza is no longer rightly considered to be self-defense in a way that would then justify the UN's attempt at having a humanitarian pause that the U.S. did veto?
So I reject both the left-wing criticism as well as the neocon bloodthirst here. The left-wing criticism, though, is this idea of proportionality. I reject that because it almost pretends as though those things were happening at the same time. They weren't. Israel was struck, minding its own business, struck.
Let me pause there. There is no minding its own business, because I can use that same analogy in reference to the Palestinian people going back to 1948. I could easily say, well, in the 40s, the Palestinian people were minding their own business, and then they were then pushed out of their homes. I could say that. I could say killed, beaten, pushed out of their homes and pushed into open air prison. So how far are we going to take this? Somebody was minding their own business. And have they really been minding their own business when they can control the resources that actually go into Gaza, and they can cut off the resources whenever they want to? You see how he's framing this?
By a terrorist group, really, that killed 1,000+ innocent civilians. And so Israel absolutely has a right to fully send a deterrent signal to make sure that can never happen again.
But the Palestinian people didn't have a right to do that when it was done to them from the get-go. I want to be clear about what's being said here, guys. When the Palestinian people were pushed out of their homes, which still was happening, even in 2021, I saw them doing this on the news, dragging people out of their homes at gunpoint, pushing them to live in an open air prison. Did the Palestinian people, did they have a right to push back and defend their self? According to what Vivek and other politicians are saying, no, they didn't. Some of these same people would have been against the Haitian slave revolt. Some of them would have been against that, although they applauded and sometimes say, yes, they rose up and, they did this. But what they're telling you is that the Palestinian people had the right to be occupied. That's what they're telling you. And they're purposely only going back to October 7th because they don't want to talk about the history. Because if you start talking about the history, which explains how we got here, then that can hurt you in reference to donors, and that can hurt you on the campaign trail, because then people are going to tell you, oh, no, we're not going to get into all that. You're just being anti-Semitic. That's what they're going to tell you.
Are there any limits on that?
My view is, what's that?
Are there any limits on that signal? For example, if they were
That's
to
for Israel to
kill
determine.
every, I'm sorry? If they were to kill every Gazan, for instance. So with the U.S. backing and support, the international community in the U.S. should stand by, just hypothetically, if all 2.3 million Gazans were killed.
But this is where I come out. This is where I just want to come out to be consistent. This is exactly why I think the U.S. should not be engaged militarily.
So,
if the U.S. is engaged militarily.
Then, so because the question then is, if Israel using U.S. tax dollars were to do something in violation of international law, like killing every Gazan, or let's use an example that's currently ongoing, since that obviously hasn't happened.
But Israel's not doing that. Right
no,
now.
That's why I said let's use an example that's actually happening, which is the collective punishment. That is cutting off gas, medical supplies, water, et cetera, to the entire population in violation of the Geneva Convention. Is that not the role of the U.S. or the international community to say that we don't want, at very least, American tax dollars going to continue that? And we should note that there's been an ongoing occupation of Gaza that preceded, of course, this conflict. And I'm curious to know whether you support U.S. tax dollars going on to, enabling what 18 international humanitarian organizations have described as an apartheid state.
So I think that a lot of those are unfair, inaccurate, and wrong descriptions of Israel.
No, they're not. See, this is the part they don't want to, Vivek doesn't want to discuss. They don't want to talk about the history because it exposes things, right? It is an apartheid state. So you mean to tell me 18 humanitarian organizations are incorrect? He don't want to answer that question. What she's asking him is, would you support U.S. funds going towards participating in an apartheid state, which humanitarian organizations have called out in reference to the state of Israel? Also, militarily. He said he doesn't think the U.S. militarily should get involved, but he agrees with them funding the weapons and stuff to Israel. So you are involved militarily. So which is it? Let me let him finish.
I stand by that, and that's what I mean by when I talk about the diplomatic Iron Dome. As U.S. leader, as the leader of the United States, as the U.S. president, I will be crystal clear that Israel defending its own borders, that's exactly what I believe Israel is doing and has been doing.
The fence around Gaza is not a border. A fence is not a border. So people need to stop pretending like that is a border.
Is absolutely defensible. Israel should pursue an Israel first agenda. It has a right to national self-existence. But I think it is easier for me to do that as U.S. president if we don't muddy the waters by getting involved militarily or financially or otherwise. So
see, you guys see, this is what I was trying to tell you. This is why she exposed him when she did the follow-up question. Because at the very beginning of this video, he agreed to the funding. He agreed to help with the funding. Now he's saying he doesn't want to do the funding or militarily. So what are you talking about, Vivek? This is where he gets caught. That's why I said it's titled Briahna Joy Gray Exposes Vivek, because he's just talking around in like one big circle. I don't think when it comes to this issue, like I said, he was good on the Ukraine issue in reference to don't give Ukraine funding. And here's the reason why. But when it comes to this particular issue, I don't think he gets this well. I don't think he knows much about the history. If he does know about the history, he's pretending like he doesn't. But I don't think he's good at explaining his position on this, whatever it appears to be.
we've made commitments in the past. I always stand by those commitments. Those run through 2028. But my point is, in the context of this war, look at the $16 billion aid in the $106 billion aid package that's now making its way through Congress. I don't think it's a good idea for the U.S. to further engage financially or militarily. But the flip side of that is that Israel is absolutely free to pursue what it believes to be in its own national self-interest, just as every other nation is free to do the same thing.
But every other nation isn't free to do the same thing. That's the thing, Vivek. You know that. Every other nation isn't free to do the same thing because of U.S. intervention. Every other nation isn't even free to elect their own leaders because of U.S. intervention in those countries that have known to go in and topple leaders in an effort for regime change. I think that this was a very revealing interview. I really do. I don't think he was ready for this.
Job as the United States president is to the people of this country. My exclusive obligation as the next president is to Americans here in the homeland. And that's how I'm going to lead this country accordingly, which is why I'm against the neocon call as well to willy-nilly provide aid. It muddies the waters. It creates loss of clarity that then commits us to have to make judgments that should not be the U.S.'s judgments to make. Those should be Israel's judgment on how it defends itself.
Let me pause here, and then we're going to fast forward to the next part that Bree says. So you guys know he's exposed, right? You know he exposed himself. Let me get to this next part because there's another question that Bree comes back to. And while we're waiting for that, whoops, I slid off here. Here we go. While we're waiting for this, another thing that I was going to add as well that I think is really important. Notice how he keeps saying, I'm focused on America first and I'm president of this country, right? I will be president of this country. Totally get that. Get where you're coming from, right? Focusing on home base first. But the reality is, as president of the United States, part of your job is commander in chief. Part of your job is going to be dealing with foreign policy. So you can't just say, well, my agenda is to focus on America first. If you're coming into the presidency, which will be the beginning of 2025, January 2025, we are already involved in two conflicts. You have Russia and Ukraine, and you have Israel and Palestine. So there's two international conflicts that have started under Joe Biden's administration. You are going to have to make decisions in reference to those two conflicts and foreign policy in general. So for you to just throw that back and push back and say, I'm worried about Americans first. No, yeah, you can say that, but you still have to be commander in chief. That is still part of the job. So you will have to make a decision in reference to Israel and Palestine. So you can't keep using that excuse. Let's get to this part here as well.
This issue. I wonder if you could elaborate on what your views are of the issue and what's driving the conflict in Israel and Palestine at this moment. I wonder if you could speak specifically to the ongoing occupation in Gaza. What, if anything, you see as the solution to those people who feel as though they've been pushed from their lands and kept in what has been described by a former Israeli prime minister as an open-air prison? What to do in the West Bank about the encroaching settlements that are also in violation of international law, and whether you agree with Joe Biden as he continues to push for a two-state solution.
So this is based because she's asking him about the occupation.
So my view here is simply grounded in, again, principle. I'm an America First conservative. My moral obligation is to the citizens of this country. I think that that is perfectly legitimate for every other nation, including Israel, to pursue an Israel First policy.
But what about the people
Israel
of
has a
Palestine?
right to exist. What's that?
What about Palestinians? Do they also have a right to exist?
Well, they have a right to exist, but I think that they don't have a right to attack Israel in these dastardly attacks that have taken place serially.
You guys see the problem, right? So notice how and by the way, this part right here may work against him on both sides because he admitted to that the Palestinians have a right to exist too. Some people will say that that's anti-Semitic, by the way. I don't think it is, but some people will. But you guys see the problem? He's like, Israel has a right to exist. What about the Palestinians? Well, they also have a right to exist, but they don't have the right to attack Israel. But Israel has the right to attack them. You guys see the problem with this statement? This is what he's basically saying. Israel has a right to cut off their water, cut off their electricity, cut off the food supply, keep them in an open air prison, but they don't have the right. They don't have the right to push back against any of that. They can't defend themselves. But Israel has the right to attack and to defend itself.
Had to put Israel on the defensive.
Absolutely, but I would like you to weigh on.
My view is, we're not having this discussion in the Middle East. We're having it here. My view is the U.S. needs to get the heck out of poking its nose into other people's business on the other side of the world. I mean, part of the reason that you even now have bases in places like Iraq or in Syria that are at risk of supposedly being attacked in this conflict is the problem that we shouldn't have been there in the first place. So my view is a broader disengagement in the Middle East is actually the right answer for the U.S.
But if you're coming in as president in 2025, the United States has a relationship with the state of Israel in reference to funding. They fund Israel. You know, they have healthcare. Everybody has healthcare there. From what I understand, everybody don't have healthcare here. So there is a financial relationship with the U.S. and the state of Israel that is established. And there is also aid that has gone to Israel that already is established. So when you come in as president, Vivek, these relationships already exist. So if you don't want to focus on any of the other countries or have anything to do with foreign policy, so to speak, which I don't really believe is true, or anything to do with foreign policy, so to speak, then you only want to do part of the job. You just want to do the domestic part of the presidential position. You don't want to do the commander-in-chief part. That is part of the role. See, this is why some people believe, and this is something a friend of mine used to say, this is why some people believe that in order for you to run for president, you should have to have some type of either military experience or foreign policy experience. This is why some people believe that. Because Vivek thinks he can just walk and go sit in the White House and not have to deal with international politics at all. I'm just going to focus on the U.S. I'm not going to worry about any of these other countries that we already have relationships with. So is Vivek going to cut off all of the financial relationships and investments that we have with other countries? Because once he does that, then the U.S. will no longer be an ally with those countries. How would that affect NATO? These are things to think about, folks.
I'm not running for president of the world. I'm running for president of the United States of America. And I think we have to have discipline in addressing everything through what really relates to the interests of Americans here in the homeland. So that's the way I will lead this country, and I want to be disciplined about that.
With all due respect, Vivek, I do think that some people very much see our foreign policy as one of the key responsibilities of the President of the United States of America.
It is.
And included in that is our enormous veto power that we have in the United Nations, the incredible power that we have over foreign economies through direct diplomacy and also through tools like the IMF and the World Bank, et cetera. And so if your position is simply a truly isolationist one, that the U.S. will no longer have any involvement in global affairs, that is a somewhat radical position to take and something that's a little bit different from saying that I'm going to act internationally in America's best interest. Do you see the difference there? And so what I'm asking
Well, it is. And I've never said that I want to disengage from global affairs. I think the real threat that we face is communist China. And every iota of military or economic attention that we're miring ourselves into conflicts in the Middle East with is one that leaves us weaker in deterring China from, say, annexing Taiwan, which right now, as we depend on Taiwan for semiconductors, absolutely affects the American way of life. So I think the fact that China...
So this is the problem with this candidate, man. This is the problem with this guy, because again, it's like, we don't need to have anything to do with these other countries. We don't need to take any position or anything in reference to Israel. We're just America first, and that's it. But now when you mention China, all of a sudden it's, oh, well, actually, I think we should be involved in geopolitics. There's this issue with China and Taiwan and da-da-da. You all over the place, man. You are all over the place. Like, this is a mess. I don't even know what Vivek is running on anymore.
pumping fentanyl across our southern border using the Mexican drug cartels as a vehicle to do it is killing Americans right here at home. A Chinese spy balloon flying over half this country. Yes, these are international issues that deeply matter to the United States.
The balloon that they came back and actually corrected and said it was a weather balloon, Vivek?
But my view is we have to look at global affairs through the prism of what affects Americans rather than to be the global international police. I've also been very open about questioning the wisdom of our continued involvement in the UN. I think the UN is a joke when you think about Venezuela or other countries like even North Korea staffing the Human Rights Council at the UN. This makes absolutely no sense. And if the UN or any other institution has outlived its purpose, the WHO, I will question continued funding or U.S. involvement in any international institution that impedes U.S. sovereignty.
So just so I understand, just
we
to
have
put
to
a
look at
button
this
on
through the prism of U.S. interests. That's where I stand.
So just to put a button on it, is it in U.S. interest to cut funding to Israel? Over $3 billion of funding that the U.S. gives to Israel every year. I understand your ideological position that they can do what they want as a country, but that is complicated by any U.S. funding. So I'm unclear about your distinction between you and the rest of the Republican field. They all still want to continue to fund Israel.
The distinction is clear. That's why they're all attacking me. But put that to one side. My view is the U.S. should focus on actually addressing the real threat we face. That's communist China.
So cutting funding to Israel or no?
Now it's China's you guys see this guy's all first he said just US, America first. Now it's the US should focus on China. So now we should focus on another country. You know what? Hold on. Because this is just an absolute mess. So she's asking him again, should the US cut aid to Israel?
Well, we have to stand by commitments we've already made. We're committed through 2028. Well,
so you will continue to fund Israel at current levels until 2028?
I stand by every commitment that we've made. I mean, if the U.S.
There you go, folks. There it is. You don't even need to see anymore. There it is, folks. He stands by every commitment that the U.S. has already made. So what he's saying is, if he were to win the presidency, he would still fund Israel and any other commitment financially that the U.S. government has made with other countries. So there it is, folks. There it is.
We made a commitment. We're going to stand by that commitment. And I further said that we would only cut aid to Israel when Israel tells us that they're ready to have that aid cut. Why
would Israel tell you? Guys, give me a second. He said, we would only cut aid to Israel when Israel tells us they want aid cut. Why would they tell you to stop giving them? Who comes up to? Why would they come to the U.S. and say, we don't want you to give us any more aid? Why would they do that? Who does this? Who says this? Nah, man, don't give me no more, man. Don't give me no more. We all good. We all set. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Who comes up with this?
I think is in the interests of both the U.S. and Israel for the U.S. not to be dictating what Israel's foreign policy is. I think Israel absolutely has the right to defend itself.
Can you help us understand why it's in America's interest to fund Israel to the tune of over $3 billion a year, especially since so many Americans are increasingly concerned about the humanitarian abuses that are befalling on the people of Palestine with U.S. tax dollars?
Well, I think the humanitarian abuses are in reverse. Look at what Hamas just did to Israel. But our reason for having Israel as
that doesn't make any sense. He thinks that the humanitarian abuses are worse on the Israeli side. They control all the resources. They control the food and everything. So this is crazy shit, man.
Stable allies. First of all, a lot of that aid has run through the United States, our industrial capacity, an intelligence sharing agreement that has been helpful to the United States between the U.S. and Israel, and a reliable partner in the Middle East, a region of the world where we don't have other reliable partners. But at the same time, I believe in this conflict. It's funny, not very long ago, earlier this morning, I'm having arguments with neoconservatives on the other end of the spectrum that are hitting me from exactly the opposite angle. There's an interesting discussion that's complementary to that one. The reality is, I stand affirmatively for Israel's right to fully defend itself to the fullest and to make Israel first decisions. And the problem is we're muddying the waters with the $16 billion aid package that isn't a prior commitment that we've made, but that is making its way through Congress now that I think is a bad idea. So my view is that we actually do better when we're not engaged in the Middle East. I'm not saying it's a comfortable balance of power, but you have the Arab nations, you've got the Turks, you've got Israel, all of whom have deep interest in making sure that Iran does not expand its power in the region. That's not something the U.S. should actually make worse. And I think every time we've tried to involve ourselves, we've made ourselves in the situation in the Middle East worse off for it, when in fact we have a real concern to face off with. That's China, the rise of communist China, who we depend on for our modern way of life. That combined to our own homeland security here. We're vulnerable to border incursions, cyber attacks, super EMP, electromagnetic pulse attacks in this country, missile attacks in this country. Protect this homeland, declare independence from China, avoid World War III. That's my foreign policy focus. And I do not think U.S. engagement in another no-win war in the Middle East is going to do us any good. That's why I've been alone in the GOP, actually, in identifying and staking out that position.
He could have said all that in 5 minutes. He could have just answered all this in 5 minutes. He's just been talking in circles most of the interview. But the thing is this that I want to drive home. He's going to continue to fund Israel. Okay. That word salad that he gave you there, he's going to continue to fund Israel. And the other thing is that he feels like China is a really big threat. So when he talks about, I'm just going to focus on America first, and he brings up this issue of we depend on China. Well, maybe instead of you targeting China for being successful, maybe the focus should be on building infrastructure and building things here in the United States again, so that we don't have to depend on China. Just a thought. Just a thought. Let me go to some of the comments. I don't know what he's running on anymore. Thank you for the super chat, American Autopsy. They assassinated Thomas Sankara for the same reason they later killed Gaddafi. Interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Janice. Congress funding / arming Israel violates both national and international law. It's an occupying force. Totally illegal to fund and arm occupation. Thank you for the super chat, Barack. See, I told you Vivek was a snake. JB says this guy is trying to keep Zionists happy while sounding different, but he can't. Thank you, Zakir. Vivek needs a DJ for these nonsensical freestyle sessions. And thank you, Frank. I love Bree. The way she buries Vivek love. Thank you so much for that, Frank. By the way, in reference to Israel and Palestine, where is DJ Khaled? Have you guys heard DJ Khaled say anything about this issue? No? Are we no longer the best, DJ Khaled? No? All right. We're moving on to the next story, which is about Cornel West. Now, this is a two-part story, so we're going to start with the first part. So, for those who are not aware, there actually was a national walkout for students at universities in reference to Israel and Palestine. So like I said, a lot of the younger kids, college kids, they really get it. And I want to start with this video from two of the students that were at Harvard that wrote that letter. So this is Amari and Kojo. They're speaking here at the first Boston rally that I went to. I want you to hear what happened to them because these students are being targeted. You know, there was a walkout at Boston University as well, where there were hundreds of students from different colleges in Boston that I guess like somehow met at Boston University and walked together. I was going to try to cover that, but I had a meeting, so I couldn't make it. But it turns out it's probably good I didn't, because a lot of these kids are being targeted now in a threatening way. And two of them that were targeted were Amari and Kojo. And the thing that you need to know about them is that they actually took their pictures and enlarged them, put their pictures on trucks and drove them around campus, calling them, anti-Semitic and things like that. These kids, from what I've seen, have not been protected by the university. And more people are speaking out. But you can hear this from them.
We know firsthand what these attacks feel like. There are lists with our names on it demeaning us and slandering us. They paraded a truck around campus with me and Amari and other organizers' face and names on it in an attempt to derail our organizing. Billionaire Bill Ackman is mobilizing the ruling class to make us unemployable. But we shall not be deterred. We stand proud. We raise our flag. We raise our sign. We wear the fear. We wear them.
Shamefully, it is primarily Black and Arab students that are facing the brunt of these racist attacks. They can plaster our names and faces on trucks. They can parade through Harvard Square calling us anti-Semites. They can even attempt to make us unemployable in the future. But none of that changes our solidarity with Palestine. And the fact that we believe in a free Palestine from the river to the sea.
All right. So that was two of the students that wrote the letter at Harvard University. Now, this has really prompted like a national walkout across the country this week. And Chuck Modi actually captured some of that from Howard University students also walked out. You can see here.
For our brothers and sisters in Palestine this year. Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine! Long live Palestine! Long live Palestine! Long live Palestine!
So that's Howard University. And then there's actually a student from Howard that Chuck was able to interview on camera really quick. And I want you to hear them explain like why they decided to walk out and to fight for Palestinian rights.
Howard University walkout.
Yeah, so today there was a national call to action for students and really anybody across the country to walk out of class, walk out of their jobs to show solidarity with Palestinian liberation and Palestinian resistance. And so as Howard students particularly, we understand that Black liberation is linked with Palestinian liberation. And so today we came out and we showed solidarity. We chanted, we had speakers, we educated, and we informed, because at the end of the day, none of us are free until Palestine is free. And that's why it's so crucial to be out here and to be organizing for Palestinians and supporting them in their fight and their resistance of Israel's colonialist occupation. So corporate media has an agenda, and they're continuing to spread misinformation and disinformation about what's actually going on. They're continuing to paint Palestinians as terrorists. And while we can acknowledge that anybody dying is unfortunate, right? We have to acknowledge that Palestinian resistance is always going to be justified as long as they are occupied, right? And so today, and especially for Americans all across the country, be very careful with where you're getting your information from. Be very careful with what sources you're getting your information from. I recommend looking at on-the-ground Palestinian reporters, different organizers, looking at your different local Palestinian orgs like MD to Palestine, Students for Justice in Palestine, so many different orgs, and getting your information from those who are on the right side of history, because the corporate media, it's backing Biden, it's backing this genocide, and that is not what we need to be consuming as Americans, period.
Period, she said. I told you, the young kids today, like, they get it. They get it. They know, like, mainstream media is not telling the truth. They look a little bit further. Again, they have social media. I didn't have social media when I was in undergrad, but this is also international, because even in Canada, you'll see here, this is actually McGill University, which is essentially like Canada's Harvard, for those who are not aware. It's in Montreal, Canada. They also had a walkout as well.
Gaza. 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 Gaza.
All right. So that's McGill University in Montreal, Canada there. Now, why is this interesting? Now, where did this include Dr. West? So Dr. West made an announcement recently in reference to the student protests. And then I'm going to show you, he had this discussion with Chris Cuomo about this as well, the importance of standing with in solidarity with the Palestinian people. So here's Dr. West's announcement in reference to the student activists and organizing around this particular issue.
I am on my way to UCLA to be in deep solidarity with the precious students, Palestinian students, but all students who are in solidarity with what is happening with our precious Palestinian brothers and sisters in Gaza. The genocidal assault on Gaza, the barbaric attack on Gaza. There's a national walkout across the nation of colleges and universities, and I am blessed to be a part of the walkout at UCLA. We want freedom across the board. We want equal dignity, equal rights, and equal status for Palestinians and Israelis. I am on.
All right. So that announcement came from Dr. West that he is going to participate in the UCLA student walkout. So that's huge news. Now, to go along with that, he had this discussion on News Nation with Chris Cuomo. For those who are not aware, Chris Cuomo from CNN got fired from CNN. He's now a part of News Nation, which essentially is like kind of like a Hill Rising in a way. I think they're owned by the same company, but they have like a lot of different hosts. I think more hosts than Rising does. So Chris Cuomo just doesn't seem to understand why Dr. West has this perspective. So Chris Cuomo is going to Cuomo. He's going to do what he does. But Dr. West is here to push back. Listen to this.
If Hamas were gone, Cornel, you would not have the ability to say, I get why Israel's got to defend itself. If Hamas were not motivating violence in a real way ever since the second Intifada,
that's
I don't
where
see
we
how you don't
disagree,
see
brother.
them as
That's
the
where we
problem.
disagree. No. Terrorism is defined by killing innocent people and terrorizing people.
Yes.
The Israeli Defense Forces have done it. Hamas have done it. Both are immoral in that sense. So I'm not defending the killing of innocent people.
These kids aren't accusing Hamas of genocide.
There may be people who do.
They're accusing Israel.
No, but
a place that was targeted by genocide.
What is happening?
Again, who controls the resources? So Dr. West just explained to Chris Cuomo that the IDF has been attacking people. Guys, these videos are all over social media. You can find them very easily. Chris Cuomo, I'm sure, has seen them. But again, he's doing his job of puppet keeping as well. But the thing is that you got to understand is that the IDF has been doing this to Palestinian people. These people are under military occupation. Imagine you can't go anywhere without their guns pointed in your face. You can't even leave the gates without permission from the state of Israel. And even then, that's if they want to give you the permission. They've denied permission from people who had to have surgery, that had to go to their hospitals. They've denied permission for them to leave those gates. And Chris Cuomo knows this. But again, like I said, he got to do his job of keeping the status quo as well.
No, but what is happening right now, brother, and let us be honest, if there were a Palestinian occupation of Jews, if Jews were in Gaza and Palestinians cut off water, food, electricity, bombing and killed 2,300 precious Jewish babies, which side would the American government be on? Which side would the American press be on? It would be completely different. I try to be morally consistent and say, I'm against the Palestinian occupation of Jews because Jews are precious. I'm against an Israeli occupation of Palestinians because Palestinians are precious. But when you flip that other way, all of a sudden it becomes very clear that the Palestinian lives really don't count in the way that Jewish lives do for the American government. And that's what I will never succumb to. Why? Because I'm trying to be a decent human being, and also, as you know, as a Christian, each one of those precious human beings are made in the image and likeness of God, and I'm going to stay in contact with the humanity of each, and I'm going to be critical, and I'm going to condemn any group that kills innocent people. Those are war crimes, my brother.
Yes.
Is it just me, or does Dr. West seem more assertive and more fiery now that he's not with the Green Party? And I've seen him fired up like this before when he wasn't running for president. He had a debate with someone about Barack Obama. I think it was on the Black News Channel. He had a debate with them about this, and he was pretty fired up then. But I am noticing something. It does seem like since he left the Green Party, it seems like he's more assertive. Now, it could just be a coincidence, but I think what he said there is really important. Now, listen to Chris.
I get it. And the context here has a lot of different levels, but nobody's arguing what precipitated this event.
No, there is no lots of different levels. Listen, guys, start pushing back on this, okay? When people tell you, oh, there's so many different levels and layers to it, it's so complex, man. Start pushing back on that. It's not complex. It's actually very easy to follow. You can look this up on Google yourself and start with the history, start with 1948 and go forward. It's not difficult. It's not complex. Colonizers came in, colonized the land, kicked the people out, imprisoned the people in an open air prison, and have been terrorizing them since. It's that simple. They control the resources. The Palestinian people do not. That's not complex. You can sum this up very quickly. And another things in there you can add that there have been multiple opportunities to arrange some type of peace agreement, and negotiation, and Israel denied it. They didn't want it. They refused it. End of story. Ain't no different layers, man. You just saying that, Chris. You're saying there's different layers because you know, probably in order to keep your gig that you got now, you got to support the status quo. And the status quo position is to support the state of Israel. I'll be very clear. The status quo is not to support the Palestinians. Let's continue. They kill me with that.
October 7th precipitated the event. You say, well, but October 7th was justified, but everything came before it. I say terrorism is never justifiable because we didn't make that case on 9/11.
Well,
there was a lot of reasons to say America had done the wrong thing in the region. But when al-Qaeda hit us on 9/11, it wasn't therefore justified in an understood human reaction to suffering. It was terrorism, and we went into the wrong country and killed everyone we saw, and the college campuses weren't blowing up like this. Do you believe anti-Semitism is rearing its head in America?
But
see, here we go. They're going to try to lead it all the way. By the way, I want to make something very clear. I've never seen all these newscasters, Chris Cuomo, and all the politicians. I've never seen them fight this hard for Black people in this country. Never, never. Not even during George Floyd. I've never seen them fight this damn hard. Never. They fight for the countries that support the interests of the United States. That's what they fight for. And when you look at people in this country, they fight for the people that support the interests of the United States. They don't really feel like they get anything from us. This is why they say, oh, let them stay in the ghettos. They'll just fight each other and kill each other. That's why they make these comments. Just let them stay there. They feel the same way about poor white people too, by the way. Let them stay in the trailer park. Let them stay poor. Just let them take each other out. They fight for the people who are part of the status quo that help maintain the status quo in this country, and the people that they feel in their minds are worth fighting for and worth saving because they are doing something for the U.S. in return. Think about it.
But I mean, with anti-Semitism, we know anytime you have Jews in the Christian civilization and in Islamic civilization, you're going to have Jewish hatred. That's why we got to be against Jewish hatred, the hating of Jews, no matter what.
Our universities
but the point is this: but don't put words in my mouth and other people's mouths. When we talk about precious Palestinian humanity, precious Palestinian resistance, there has been nonviolent forms of resistance, and the Israeli Defense Forces shot them down, my brother. Martin Luther.
That includes peaceful protests, by the way. They were shooting at their feet when there were peaceful protests.
The King's spirit was invoked. We tried to promote that. They shot him down. What did South Africa do when they shot him down? What did Nelson Mandela do? He formed a guerrilla group, but what did he do? He attacked only military sites.
He didn't rip the breasts off women and mutilate babies and rape old women until he...
You hear what he's saying? He's still spreading the baby lie. He's still spreading the lie about the babies. Do you see this, guys? What a joke.
Broke their bones.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. That's the difference between the ANC and Hamas. that in Hamas, like any other group, I'm not targeting Hamas at all, and I'm not justifying Hamas. But what I'm trying to do is this. I'm trying to get people to say that if you're really concerned about the violence across the board and the barbarity across the board, you're going to have to understand the history of the vicious, ugly, atrocious war crimes.
I don't disagree.
Notice how he cuts him off when he starts to talk about the history of it. See, this is what they don't want people to hear. They don't want people to, by the way, you know, I used to give News Nation a lot of credit because I felt like they did present like both sides. You know, they were pretty good at that. But I do also notice, and I do have a concern when it comes to independent media. Well, I guess they're not really independent because they're owned by Nexstar, just like Rising. I do have this concern. My fear is that the new form of independent media, the Breaking Points, the Rising, News Nation, TYT, my fear is that people are going to look to those channels and see them as, oh, these are fully independent people and da-da-da, and not realize that there's propaganda there as well. That's my fear, that people will see that, oh, they're on YouTube, you know, da-da-da, they're independent, and not realize there is still propaganda there as well. That's what I'm afraid of. Let's continue.
Don't disagree.
We got to be honest. Read Norman Finkelstein's book on Gaza and get a sense of what's going on.
I don't disagree that there is
a
sadness that approaches madness in terms of what has happened in Palestine for many decades. There's no question.
There's a sadness that approaches madness, but Chris Cuomo just wants you to stay and be sad. Chris Cuomo say, yeah, it's sad. But instead of getting mad, instead of doing that, just sit with the sadness. If we were backed on Jim Crow, would Chris Cuomo say, man, it's really sad that those black people have to be treated like that, but just sit with the sadness. It's a damn shame that black people have to be slaves in this country and treated this way and whipped and picking cotton and free labor, not making any money off of slavery or anything like that. That's a damn shame that their families were ripped apart. The husbands were taken from the wives. The babies were taken from the mothers. That's so sad. But you just have to sit there. You can't rise up. Chris Cuomo would have been against the Haitian revolt. He's a Cuomo. He's a Cuomo. Don't let this man try to fool you into thinking that he's something different because he's working for News Nation now and not a part of CNN. He is a Cuomo. He know how his bread is buttered. Come on. He ain't crazy. He ain't crazy. He's not going to give up. He's not going to give up the ties that he has.
Question that better should be demanded of the region and of all the allies. And also, Cornel, I would never put words in your mouth or anybody else's. I bring you on out of respect
that's why,
to have a conversation.
I understand.
All right.
I do.
And you're welcome
understand.
back again.
That's why I was just trying to correct and
Always.
say I would never say they're justifying. We got to be honest about our morality being consistent.
Understood.
But also understand there's rich humanity among Palestinians and Israelis, and trying to understand how vicious that occupation. We got to cease fire. We got to exchange the hostages. We've got to end the siege, and we've got to end the occupation and see how these Jewish and Palestinians can live together some way, somehow. What a pipe dream is still worth pursuing.
Hey, thank you for.
All right. And let me go ahead and stop that there. So like I said, I have noticed, like, since Dr. West left the Green Party, I do feel like he's been more, you know, assertive, like in these interviews. It's just something I've noticed. So that's part one. Now we get to part two, which is recent news that happened today about Dr. West's campaign. Now, I want to remind you guys again, like, we're just going through the timeline here. Dr. West announced presidential campaign through the People's Party. That was under with Nick Briahna. He left the People's Party and went to the Green Party, and then left the Green Party and decided to run as an independent. Now, before we get to that campaign news, I want you to hear what Margaret Kimberly had to say really quick in reference to Cornel West when she was on Ron Paclone's show about his decision to leave the Green Party. Just listen to this real quick.
Cornel West speaks very, very highly of you. You are a Green Party member.
Yep.
Do you agree with Cornel West's recent decision to not seek the Green Party nomination?
I do not. I was very, very disappointed. I thought it could have been huge politically for the country, for the Green Party, for the left in general, for him. But for whatever reason, I get the feeling he hadn't really thought it through, and it was something he wasn't really ready to do. And so I was extremely disappointed. The Democrats, by the way, in New York State, have gotten the Greens off the ballot. We don't have a ballot line anymore. Andrew Cuomo, one of his parting gifts, they raised the threshold for getting nominating petition signatures, and it's this huge number that we can't reach. And absent someone like, even with a big name person like West, it still would have been hard, but it gave us some possibility. You know, all the issues that the Green Party stands for, that people want and agree with. There was something about having this well-known person that there were people I was surprised who said, I would vote for Cornel West. I was kind of pleasantly surprised. And now we're back to square one. Who would that be? The people whose names have been mentioned are people I don't want. I don't want to spend time talking about people I don't want.
No, sure.
But so we're back to square one, scrambling, and New York is not alone. Other states have gotten the Greens off the ballot.
Okay, and we can just stop there. So I wanted you to hear, you know, the Green Party is not without its flaws. They're having some issues as well. Like New York is one of those states where even if you're part of the Green Party, you're going to have to run as an independent in states like New York, right? Even if you're running through the Green Party. So, and that's unfortunate. And so I say all that because there was news that broke today, and this came straight from Dr. West himself. And he said, I'm very sorry about the resignation of Brother Peter Dow based on his health. I sincerely pray for him and his precious family and thank him for his service to my campaign. And Peter Dow did respond right here, and he did say, thank you, Brother West. And then he was sharing some information about Gaza as well. So this is tricky because, you know, some people had already lost like their enthusiasm for Dr. West's campaign after he left the Green Party. For others, that brought them on board. They were excited he was running as independent and didn't want him to run through the Green Party, right? But then there was always still this issue with Peter Dow. So Peter Dow's the campaign manager, or was the campaign manager. He came from the Democratic Party. For those who are not familiar, he managed, you know, he worked with Hillary Clinton. And that's why a lot of people have criticism, because he was part of Hillary Clinton's campaign and was a part of the whole Bernie bro like thing. So I interviewed Peter. I did ask him questions about that. And Peter has since, you know, left the Democratic Party and has been promoting third party and independence. But there was a lot of hesitancy because Peter did come from Marianne Williamson's campaign, and I'm starting to see a pattern. Now, I want to show you what I mean by that pattern. When I interviewed Peter, one of the questions I did ask him about was, you know, the leaving of Marianne Williamson's campaign and joining Dr. West's campaign. At that point in time, the reason that he gave is because he said that his parents had health issues, that they were ailing, and so he had to leave the campaign to take care of them. But I want you to hear what he said here, and I want you to make some guesses yourself. Listen to this. Your tweet, you mentioned that you were having to leave the campaign to take care of your parents. I guess they were ailing at that point in time, but a lot of people have assumed that it's more than that because of all the other information that's come out about Marianne's campaign. So I want to give you the opportunity to explain why did you decide to leave that campaign?
Yeah, may I say why I decided to join it as well, because I think that'll provide some context. Okay, so when I joined Marianne's campaign, there was nobody else who had declared. Certainly Cornel West had not, and certainly Robert Kennedy Jr. had not, and Biden had not. I had made a vow that I was going to do everything I could to shake up the system this time and to not let the duopoly just decide who we were getting. And I've been very vocal about it, trying to push Biden out of the race. I have privately and publicly encouraged both Marianne Williamson, and I'm going to be very slow and crystal clear about this, and Bobby Kennedy Jr. to run as independents, not because I support them or don't support them. This is, for me, was all about a mission for it to actually have democracy. The Democrats were saving democracy. You're not saving. First of all, what democracy are you saving? Second of all, you're kicking Greens off the ballot. You're squelching any sort of opportunity for an actual primary. So for me, when I joined that campaign in 2021, I think I sent you this tweet. I don't know if maybe you can put it up or share it with your viewers. In 2021, I publicly told Marianne Williamson in an exchange on Twitter, I'm supporting third parties and independent candidates. Marianne hired me knowing that was my position. And I encouraged her to do it, both in the campaign, and I encouraged her to do it when I left the campaign.
One second, Peter. Sorry to interrupt, but I found that, and I do want to have a question really quick before you go on. So this is the tweet that Peter is referring to, calling on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, run as independents, time to stop the farce that the Democratic primary is Democratic. So this was May 25th of 2023. So just so people are clear and understand that, when you joined that campaign, your intention was to get them to run, or to get her and to also get RFK Jr. to break away and run as an independent.
I believe that was the right thing. I have to be careful, not because I have an NDA. Marianne Williamson released me from my NDA, but because I'm a professional and I don't talk shit, excuse my language, about people I've worked with, whether I agree with them or not. So I'm not here to trash Marianne Williamson. And the issue with my mother. So here's what happened. At the time that Marianne called me and told me I'm running and I need a campaign manager, I was down in Florida where my mother was in hospice care. She's still okay, thank God, a year later. But my mother was very, very sick in hospice care. And then at the same time, Leela, my wife, her mother received a terminal diagnosis, and also in Florida. So we were down there taking care of our parents, and Marianne called. I thought, okay, this is an opportunity for me to do what I thought. Maybe run and do a dirty break. Maybe she'll decide to run as an independent. Whatever we do, we're going to put some fear into the system, into the coronation of Joe Biden. I thought, I'm trying to be strategic here. Nobody else was running. I had no idea Cornel West was going to run. I certainly, this is my dream to be working.
Okay. And I think, you've seen enough there. But the point that I'm trying to make is this, he left Marianne Williamson's campaign because there were health issues with the family. So it's just now he's leaving Dr. West's campaign also because of health issues. Now, I don't know anything more than what I saw in that tweet. I don't know if you guys do or not, but that's all that I know. And I'm gonna keep it real. Like, some people don't believe it. I've heard from a number of people today. Some people don't believe it. Some people think that that's just an excuse. Some people believe that Peter set all this up from the get-go, because this is what has been said to me, that some people feel like since he joined the campaign when Dr. West was under the Green Party, then the next thing you know, Dr. West leaves the Green Party. Peter's still the campaign manager. Then the next thing you know, now Peter is stepping down as campaign manager. So what I want people to understand is that ballot access is crucial, and it's not easy to get ballot access as an independent or a third party candidate. The difference was running through the Green Party is that the Green Party already has ballot access, and I believe secured at least in 18 states from last I understood. So he would already start off with that 18. So when he switched from a Green to independent, now it's like he has to start all over again in reference to ballot access. So when Dr. West was on the show last time, what I explained to him is that I was concerned about certain states. We'll give three in particular: California, Texas, and Arizona in reference to the ballot access. Those states require a lot of money to raise as an independent. This is not to say you can't do it, but it is harder, right? Whereas the Green Party already has access to those states. So the thing is that they were just almost done getting the ballot access for Arizona for the Green Party. So there's been a lot of changes that have happened within the campaign in a short amount of time. And that can give people pause. And I can't sit here and tell you not to pause. I can't sit here and tell you not to be concerned. I can't tell you if Peter's telling the truth or not telling the truth. I don't know. I only know what was in the tweet. But what I can say, and I know it's not 2024 yet, but what I can say is the way that things have changed and the pace that these changes have happened, it's a cause for concern. And so my question to Dr. West would be, what are the next steps forward? Because now Dr. West not only has to start over as an independent and trying to get ballot access as an independent in all those states, but now he has to find another campaign manager. So there's a lot happening in a short amount of time. Now, I have noticed some changes for the positive. I have noticed that in these interviews now, Dr. West seems to be a lot more fiery than he was when he was under the Green Party. Again, I don't know if that was just part of, Green Party maybe didn't want him talking a certain way. I don't know for certain, but I have noticed the change. But that being said, now it's like back to square one. Now Dr. West has to find another campaign manager. And he's starting all over as an independent trying to get ballot access. And we can't ignore the fact that some people are wondering, did Peter Dow mess this up all on purpose? Did he convince Dr. West to leave the Green Party and then he leaves and he runs an independent? Was this all a part of Peter's plan? And I also have to ask the question because he knew that there were family health concerns when he was a part of Marianne's campaign. That's why he stepped down from the campaign. So was it a good idea at that point in time for him to manage another campaign, knowing that there were those health concerns in the family? These are just questions that I have. But I mean, for all the people that said, like, this guy is doing this on purpose, going to mess it up, this just is just going to validate like their feelings about how they felt. I don't know. We can talk about this more on Call-In tonight, but I'm really, it's concerning because like I said, you're like starting all over from square one. But that being said, the exact opposite has happened for some people. They're like, yay, Peter's gone. They're happy that Peter's not a part of the campaign anymore. I don't know. Maybe I can talk to Dr. West about this to see, the next steps for the campaign or how he's feeling about this. I don't know, man. I don't know. But I do hear that there is a recently unemployed campaign manager named Dennis Kucinich. I wonder if he would be open to doing this. I don't know. But it is a cause for concern. But we can talk about this on Call-In tonight. Eric, when we clip, we're going to clip that as two separate stories. Okay, but there was a poll. You guys answered it in reference to Vivek Ramaswamy. Eric, I'll take that poll whenever you're ready. Do you trust Vivek Ramaswamy foreign policy position? We have 852 votes. 5% said, yes, I trust his position. 79% said, no, I don't trust his position. 6% said, I trust it a little bit. And 10% said, I am not sure. And one more thing I want to flash up here really quick. I don't want to forget about this. There is a huge protest happening November 4th. This is sponsored by Answer Coalition in DC. Saturday, November 4th, 2 p.m. at Freedom Plaza. They also have buses that you can join as well. Like you can get on the bus. Like if you don't have another way to get there, they're going to have buses to bring people to DC. So for those of you interested, National March on Washington, Free Palestine, that's November 4th, 2 p.m. at Freedom Plaza. I actually won't be able to attend. That's actually a B-Day. That's the Hub's B-Day weekend. So I actually already have plans. But if you guys can make it there, definitely make it there. I put the link to it in the chat. I'm going to take a quick break. I'll come back and we'll do call in. I'm sure you have lots of questions. I have some answers. Let's do it.
We'll see, right? Do we have answers? Yeah, that's a good question. All right. This is the part of our show where we give Sabrina a little break before we transfer into call-in. And call-in is an app where you can call in and we can hear what you have to say. Let's see. I just put the link in the chat if you want to get a head start. And Sabrina usually pins the link to the call-in room. So you can jump in there. Yeah, you can do call in on your laptop with your browser. You can do call in on your smartphone and use it like a phone and call in that way. And yeah, we want to hear what you think. Yeah, this whole Cornel thing. I mean, you know, I'll be honest with you. I don't know what to think at this point. But let's see. Speaking of what you were thinking, what we have with some chats here. Built up super chats. This is from back when we were doing the Vivek story. Thanks for this super chat. Esoteric teachings. Vivek sounds like Bernie on the Zionist issue. Yeah, I mean that Vivek, you know what he's doing. He's trying to sell you Vivek. He's trying to have it both ways. And just I always think of like you know, the used car salesman with Vivek, and it's going to be like, you know, you're going to love this car. You know, that's the vibe I always got from him. But I think, you know, I thought Vivek was going to do better, and you know, but I think he's just, people aren't buying it, and I think a lot of the Republican voters probably don't like the way he looks as well. Can be a factor in there. And yeah, just from the poll numbers, it just doesn't seem to be working, but that's probably just as well. Let's see what else we got here. Thanks for the super chat, Barack Obama them. Saying the Jews told DJ Khaled to stay silent. Thanks for that super chat. And thanks for this one, Jose Alvarado. Who says, saying this is a centuries-old religious conflict is like saying the Trail of Tears was about Christianity versus Native Americans' religious beliefs. Yeah, that's, you know, a good point. I mean, this stuff is really about money and power and resources. The land is a resource. And, you know, I think what's clear to anyone who looks at it objectively is that the Israelis and the Israeli, put it this way, if you look at it objectively, it's clear that one side wants all the resources in Palestine and has the power to make that happen, and they're making it happen, and they're rolling over the other side that's in their way. You know, I think that's just the objective facts of what's going on there. Thanks for the super chat. None of your business. Churches, you're still preaching the beheaded baby lie. Thanks for that one. Maybe he meant Cuomo. Let's see. Oh yeah, here's an interesting one. Someone put in Ronan. If Bree gets sacked from Rising, will she run Dr. West's campaign? Well, they could do worse. I'll say that for sure. And thanks for the super chat. None of your business. Make Dennis K his campaign manager. Yeah, that Sabrina mentioned. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, after, you know, Dennis K stood there behind RFK, basically describing Palestinians like subhumans, I really have to wonder how much I can trust and believe in Dennis K at this point. I think he's ruined his legacy. And thanks for the super chat, Goba44. Is Dr. West more aggressive in interviews now because he knows he's not a serious campaign anymore? No, I mean, I don't think that. In fact, you know, I would actually disagree with Sabrina a little bit. I really have. I can't say personally that I've seen a change in Dr. West. You know, I think he's always very outspoken and very, you know, very forceful. You know, he's been speaking out in favor of the Palestinians for decades, literally. And so I think, you know, that's part of why, you know, his campaign in and the prospect of his campaign generated that much excitement. And let's see, I got one or two chats out here on the rock fins. We got to do a little machinations here to bring up. Let's see, I can do that with a click here and a click there and a little scroll there, and here we go. All right, from the Rockfins. Thanks for this paid comment on Rockfin. Hempcar. What happened here was the gradual habituation of the people, little by little, to being governed by surprise, to receiving decisions deliberated in secret, to believing that the situation was so complicated that the government had to act on information which the people could not understand or could not be released because of national security. And I think that's from They Thought You Were Free by Milton Mayer. Thanks for that super chat, Hempcar. And yeah, I think, you know, there is this whole game of saying, you know, oh, it's so complicated and the secret info. And that's used in a lot of ways by the elite power structure to, you know, to try and obfuscate things. And, you know, if you dig down, it's usually not that complicated. It's usually about money and power. And thanks for this, let's call it right. Thanks for this tipped comment on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Regarding Dr. West needing a campaign manager, well, Dennis Kucinich is available now. Sabby. Let me scroll this down to get the rest of it. There we go. You know them, bring them together. All right. Well, there's another vote out there for Dennis from Roger. So, yeah, I'm not sure about the Dennis thing.
Yeah, I don't know Dennis Kucinich. I don't know him. I've never met him.
You don't know everybody?
No. But Dr. West may know him, but I've never met Dennis.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I said while you were on break was, you know, the way Dennis stood behind RFK when he was basically calling Palestinians subhuman. I really can't say how much I believe in Dennis anymore. I think he's ruined his legacy.
Well, he did leave. So there's that. Maybe he was trying to convince him. Maybe he was trying to convince them. I don't know. All right, guys, but we're going to head over to call in. I'm excited about that. Let's do the darn thing. Let me go ahead and pull that up here. Yeah. Let's go in here. Pull this up. Copy. Oh, you got it. All right. All right, guys, we're going to go over to call in. Join me over there. The link is pinned to the top of the chat. This is episode 133, Cornel West campaign, GOP speaker, Vivek, and more, and anything else you want to get off your chest, folks. We're going to do it over at call-in. So again, that link is pinned to the top of the chat. So you know how we do this. Oh, and tomorrow night, Shama Sawant will be here. Don't miss it. Other than that, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.